Yeah, I'm hoping that the new stadium will retain that.
Yeah.
I think White Hart Lane has always been a good ground to go to for atmosphere. A kind of quirky place, Tottenham. Not the most luxurious part of the world of North London, but I think it has a lovely character to it. Even the way you get there, you can get the tube to Seven Sisters, but a lot of people might get the actual train from Liverpool Street to White Hart Lane, and then you walk out and you're pretty much on the high road. So I've always enjoyed going there. I remember on my birthday I went in 2003. We played Everton. Robbie Keane scored, and I was in the South Stand where they all stand still in the old White Hart Lane, and the atmosphere was fantastic there. And Freddie Canute put a 30-yarder into the top corner right in front of me. So that was a memory I'll never forget. I saw Spurs play AC Milan in the Champions League last 16 and draw with them, goalless draw, which qualified us for the quarterfinals back in 2011, and that was probably the best night until recently for Tottenham Hotspur, until they beat Real Madrid possibly in the group stage. I haven't been to see them at Wembley. I'm going next week, but I have been to Wembley before for a Champions League final. So I love Wembley as a stadium, but I think unfortunately you can't put 90,000 people in there every week, and that has hurt the atmosphere. Yeah. I saw Spurs play Chelsea there in the League Cup final a couple of years ago. We lost that match 2-0. But yeah, White Hart Lane has given me great memories as a fan everywhere I've been around the ground. But I think what has hurt Tottenham in recent years is the lack of capacity. 36,000 is not enough, and you do feel that the old stadium was not fit for purpose, and hopefully the new one will, but it will retain that closeness and that atmosphere that the old stadium did have.
For you, Simon, what's the best atmosphere you've ever experienced, particularly I suppose at the old White Hart Lane more so than Wembley?
Well, the couple of games I went to at White Hart Lane were kind of FA Cup matches, and then I went to see them play. We lost 2 games at home one year, and the 2 games we lost at home were against Real Madrid and Wigan. And I had the misfortune of making the Wigan game, and Hugo Rodriguez broke my heart with about 5 minutes to go in that one. But just going back to John's point about the atmosphere at the old stadium, yeah, the stands are very much on top of the pitch. It's a very tight pitch as well. You'd fancy being able to kick the ball out from one end of the field to the other. And that's how tight it was. And then now later this year, hopefully with the new stadium, that kind of the white wall they have, kind of similar to Dortmund's yellow wall.
Yeah,
that I'm really looking forward to seeing. It's important to get the right fans in that area. You don't want it to be the family stand, or they better make sure that supporters, clubs are there, so the noise will just kind of funnel back down onto the pitch, and it'll kick on from the old stadium.
Yeah, and I suppose James as well. How about yourself? Because you've been going for a long time as well. What's the best atmosphere you've ever experienced in that old ground?
Yeah, easily the standout fixture for me was the night that we beat Inter Milan 3-1. They were reigning European champions at the time, and Bale, like, no word of a lie, it's the best individual performance I've ever witnessed. Like, he absolutely destroyed Maicon. He just dribbled past him constantly. Just the entire stadium was just seeing like taxi from Maicon, and you could see between Luis Figo patting Harry Redknapp on the back at the end of the game, saying like, that's some player you have on your hands in Gareth Bale, and Luka Modric spraying the ball around. We played so well. I think I know Tottenham are probably better now in terms of overall league position, but I think that team that Harry Redknapp had, it just had everything. It had pace. You had Modric in the middle, just pulling the strings, and we were just so brilliant to watch that night. And even just on White Hart Lane itself, just how packed it was. The media, we would be sitting in the West Lower Stand, and you'd almost be sitting across from the media. You'd shake hands with them if you wanted to. And the stadium was so small that the benches, they couldn't even fill everyone. So I remember for the Real Madrid game that Simon went to as well, Sergio Canales and Raul Albiol, they actually sat pretty much right beside us because there wasn't enough room on the bench. So I think that really kind of added to the atmosphere of White Hart Lane in terms of, it was very unique. It was old and creaky, but it was Tottenham Stadium, and it really felt like Tottenham's home.
Yeah. John, I think you were telling me yesterday, you ended up sitting quite close to Alex Ferguson and being in and around the director's box.
I won't tell you how I got in there, but I saw Alan Sugar and Alex Ferguson at close quarters when we played Manchester United in 2007. And I was in a suit and I was not cheering. And there's nothing to cheer about, to be honest, Raf, because Manchester United annihilated us 4-0. John O'Shea ended up playing in goal. And I really saw how good United were at that time. Ronaldo's playing was brilliant, goals, Ferdinand and Vidic, and you could see that they would become European champions soon, and they did the next year. So that wasn't the best of memories, even though there was just a couple of moments before the game, and I was a person when I was young who could never get tickets for anything. And I keep, for that reason, a drawer of tickets. So I actually have, I was looking at it today, the programme from 1988, the first game I went to against Portsmouth, Easter 1988, 30 years ago, and I have all my Tottenham tickets within that. So matches against Wimbledon and Everton, which were goalless draws. I saw them play Newcastle, losing 2-1, Alan Shearer scoring. Aaron Lennon's one of his first matches in 05. Saw them beat West Ham, Jermaine Defoe. I've touched upon Robbie, but yeah, that was a special game to go to. I've seen a couple of Liverpool matches as well. Stephen Gerrard at White Hart Lane. I think the last time I was at White Hart Lane was when we beat Manchester City in 2016. The last season that they played there, and that was, I think, the season Spurs nearly won every game at White Hart Lane. Dele Alli scored, and they just were brilliant against City in the first half. So that's a memory I'll never forget, and I'm looking forward to the new stadium. And I really, really do hope, as Simon's saying, that the atmosphere matches the old atmosphere, but with a crowd that is fit for purpose. And I always like seeing Irish players at White Hart Lane. Robbie was one, Chris Hughton I remember growing up with. We even had the likes of Neil Fenn at one stage, Stephen Carr,
Stephen Kelly more recently
as well, Andy Reid. Yeah, so always great to see Irish players there. And I'm sometimes I go up to the Dublin Spurs supporters club up in the top of O'Connell Street, and that's a great club to go to for a bit of crack and to watch the game. And they'll always have the game wherever it's been beamed in from. They'll always have the game. Yeah. Also, Athlone Spurs are a good supporters club. So I think there are a lot more Tottenham fans out there than we give credit for, Raf and Simon and James, you know. So
yeah, well, you see, when I was growing up, it was an era when Spurs were kind of, it's Tottenham
being
era.
Spursy.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So you wouldn't have got to know a lot of, well, and Leitrim's a very small place, so you're only meeting a small number of people at a particular time. So I only knew the United, Liverpool and Arsenal fans, and that was it. And you know, you might meet the odd Leeds fan. It always happens in cycles where there might be a bunch of Irish players in and around the same time, or there's a moment of success, and Leeds kind of had that, so that's maybe why we saw one or two as well. You never got close to the director's box, I presume, unlike JD here.
No, I actually, the first time I went over, I took my dad over on a corporate thing, so I booked two tickets in the Oak Room.
Who was doing the speeches?
It was Pat Jennings, and then they had Michael Dawson came in, did one player in after to take a few photos and that kind of thing. So I got a tour of the dressing room, all that kind of stuff as well, yeah. So, be in the dressing room, John, yeah?
No, the closest I've been to something kind of that you'll boast about or talk about, it was we lost 5-4 to Arsenal. And I think Wenger and I think it was Yal at the time were about 5 or 6 seats in front of me. And when Nuruddin Naybet scored, I think it was one of the best 5-minute periods of my life until Arsenal equalised. Yeah, so no, but I my best experience, as I said, with Spurs wasn't in the director's box. It was in the South Stand when we beat Everton, and they were giving Wayne Rooney unmerciless stick.
Yeah.
And as long as the stick is on the right side of being decent, I think that's all right. Sometimes I think some of the anti-Arsenal stuff can be a bit over the top. But I just love the matchday experience of Spurs. You know, get a bit of a burger or a hot dog outside the ground. I've seen them play most of the top clubs. And I'm just hoping that we can have Champions League football there in the new stadium if we can manage to have a decent season after the little blip we've had recently.
Yeah, and I suppose for you, James, like obviously the new stadium is 62,000 seater more or less. It's going to be hosting NFL games as well. And as Simon was saying, actually the South Stand, which is supposed to be kind of like that yellow wall that Dortmund have, it's all quite exciting, but the cost obviously 850 million. Are you a bit worried about the scale of that? Especially, I know the cost went up because of Brexit.
Yeah, and in the Telegraph the other day they were saying that the cost could be £1.2 billion. Tottenham denied that, but I think it's kind of backfired to Daniel Levy, because instead of appointing Mace as the single contractor, he opted to go for multiple contractors, and that's kind of mirrored Tottenham's transfer spending in a way, that instead of having kind of a team effort towards picking out targets, that they've kind of just left themselves a bit all over the place, and when they've been trying to save money, it's going to backfire on them. So yeah, I think the new stadium is going to be fantastic. Like the South Stand, like Simon says, it's going to be like that yellow wall. It's the single biggest single stand in the UK. It's going to hold 17,000 people. And it's the front row of that particular stand. It's only going to be 4.9 metres away So you're going to have that close-knit feel that you had at White Hart Lane, maybe not quite as tightly packed, but it's going to be pretty close. And in terms of a modern stadium, that's pretty much all you can ask for. And I think it's going to be pretty good in terms of keeping in the noise. They worked with the same acoustic people that would be responsible for hosting U2 concerts. So they've really thought about that, and I think it's going to be a great stadium, providing it actually happens this season. They're saying late January as a potential opening date, but we'll just have to wait and see, really, unless it's written off.
Yeah, and actually, maybe as a final point, actually, for you lads here in studio, so James touched on the Telegraph piece. So there was another piece in which they obviously brought up the news that Construction News magazine brought up about what's been going on behind the scenes, and obviously a lot of this hasn't been corroborated, so we're not sure exactly what's happening. But what was your immediate reaction? Was there a kind of worry that, because there was talk about like builders kind of drinking and then other things going on as well, and we don't really know the ins and outs of it because there have been denials as well on the other side?
I think it's a very well run club. Tottenham as a business has been extremely well run, so I'm sceptical about these stories, and if anything did happen, I think it would be sorted out pretty quickly. I'm not too concerned. I mean, obviously it's disappointing that we're not there from the start of the season, but I'm more concerned about what the players are doing on the pitch and the lack of signings that the club have made, rather than when we go into the new stadium. It'll happen. I'd rather that we go in and everything is beautiful and it's safe and pristine and it's not like a building site.
Yeah.
You don't want to see that. And I think we've seen, as you touched upon early in the conversation, that West Ham, it has not worked. West Ham leaving Upton Park or the Belen Ground or whatever they want to call it.
I think it's the problem is where they went to.
They still left and they still went somewhere that has not worked out. The supporters are not happy with it. The performances, it's not been the same.
Yeah.
And I'd rather Tottenham go in 2 years' time if it's perfect, rather than it being going in now and not perfect.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. Would you be worried when you look at, say, what happened with Arsenal? It's obviously a very different club, but at the time, you know, they built the 61,000-seater stadium, which is just ever so slightly smaller than the one you're going to get. I'm not sure if that number was quite deliberate when Spurs were coming up with it.
It's the amount of seats they could fit in the ground, Raf.
But in terms of the escalating cost and maybe that hitting, you've already seen a summer where there was no transfer spend at all. Whether that's related is another matter, but would you worry kind of long term whether that's going to hit the team in the short term? Especially when you're at this point where you're in the Champions League and you're on the cusp of something.
No, I'm not worried at all. I mean, like the club is ticking along nicely. The squad is there. Yeah, I mean, what signings could we have made? You know, I mean, Lucas Moura came in January and it's taken him the 6 months to get up to speed. So technically he was a new signing, even though he was 6 months prior. I just don't see where you can improve that team, and then you're buying a squad player, and how much are you going to pay for a squad player? So no, I'm perfectly happy the way things are going. I was disappointed with the Watford loss. They were 1-0 up. I remember watching it going, I'd nearly take a draw now at 1-0, you know, and they fell asleep on 2 set pieces. So other than that, no, I think they've been in fine fettle. The Inter Milan game was a bit of a. You think they would have learned the lesson from the Watford game? They should have seen that game out. They didn't, but now they have Barcelona in Wembley, and then they have 2 must-win back-to-back games against PSV. And, you know, we'll know by the start of December where they're really at.
Okay, well, that's all quite interesting, and it's good that John's actually made the effort. I didn't actually ask.
It was actually nothing. It was completely coincidental, lads. You know, I just.
You did say that on the way in, actually. Yeah.
I put the Spurs shirt on today, and Raf said, "We have a Spurs conversation." So there you go. That's loyalty to your club, and that's the coincidence of that. So.
Well, look, an effort is an effort. James Hopper as well on Skype made quite the effort as well. James, thanks a million for taking the time, and also very nice jerseys. Just as a quick question, who signed all of those? Because I can see, even from here, I can see signatures on them.
Yes, so the one on my right, that would have been the seasons that Edgar Davids joined the club. So that would have been, Edgar Davids, Bobby Keane, that kind of era. And then the one beside that would have been Michael Dawson, Jermaine Keenis, Berbatov, Aaron Lennon, those kind of players. So, yeah, I thought I'd make the effort. My computer's actually balancing on a chair just so that they could be at the right height of the camera. So,
oh, well, fair play. Good stuff. Anyway, James, thanks a million for taking the time. We'll see you in work at some stage whenever you're in next. Simon, as well, thanks for coming in. John Duggan, good to have you.